High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. Hello. Today we're talking with Fatherhood Reforged, Alec Griffith, about restoring family leadership. And we know that the need for a father in the family is starting to become recognized by general society once again. However, the question remains, what role should the father play in the family in order to have a happy and stable family? And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. What is the roles that fathers play? How do we restore their ability to lead in the family? And what does it mean to lead a family? Thank you for joining me, Alec. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Noah. It's an absolute pleasure. I live in Wales with my wife and my two kids, whom we home educate. And I joined Twitter about 7 months ago and had my eyes opened quite a bit to the world of family and masculinity, and had a few revelations, but also a few truths recognized and reaffirmed, shall we say. But I've really gone headfirst into quite a bit of a roller coaster in terms of reorganizing myself and my life and my personal self-development, and really taking the mantle of father, husband, and leader seriously for the first time in probably a long time.
Excellent. Yeah, it is. I really believe there's a great awakening happening on many fronts. And really a core of that for changing the future will be a great awakening around the responsibilities of men and women in families and how it's best to structure families and parent children. Really, the family is the smallest unit of society. We tend to get the idea posited to us that it's the individual that makes up society, but there really isn't such a thing as an individual when it comes to units in the functioning of a society. We tend to function within families, and even single individuals, they find their tribe, they find their work family, whatever it happens to be, and that then becomes their source for so-called family. So really it comes down to small groups like families that form society. And so how families operate changes how society itself operates. And one of the problems we've had ever since, I would say, the end of the Second World War is a decay of the traditional gender roles where, it's not that one is assigned this and one is assigned that. It's that each ends up doing the thing that they're naturally best suited for. Now, we're not going to talk really about mother's role in family much, but we will talk about father's role. And the role that fathers are suited for is leading the family. What does that mean, Alec?
Sure. So, like you said, and it kind of ties in to the mother's role as well because of the whole duality and polarity aspect of everything. But men, we're naturally built for the way our minds work, the logical pathways we take. They are naturally suited towards a leadership position. I mean, we're always, and the fact that we don't give birth, we don't get pregnant, we don't breastfeed, means that we're never in that sort of vulnerable state either, in terms of our physical health, which means we're always ready to make decisions, make that leadership. We're always there for that call to action. We're always there to protect and defend. We're never putting ourselves at risk, as the mother does. So you kind of naturally fall into those sort of dichotomies within your relationship, if you understand and are permitted to. I know in modern society, I imagine a lot of people don't feel like they're permitted to fall within those natural roles that call to us. But we have all sorts of aspects to play on there. I mean, we full of testosterone, of course, which makes us more aggressive. We're stronger. We're fitter. Without a lot of people dislike this sort of connotation, but obviously, when a woman do get pregnant and they do have more fluctuations in their hormonal cycle than us, and men are order, women are chaos, is what they always say. And yeah, fathers are able to provide that stability. That's our core value, is the stability. We are the rock to which the family is built around.
And I think a lot of people, when you talk about stability, they're not really understanding it. What stability is it's not a thing that happens in an instant of time. What it means is consistency over time. So why are men better suited for that? Well, testosterone changes the way that our brain processes information. And actually, for example, women with higher levels of testosterone tend to think a little more like men. Men with lower levels of testosterone tend to think a little more like women. And so we really can see that it is very much the hormones changing how you process information, changing your personality in a way. And men tend to have a more deep view of time. So they will tend to see farther out into the future, but they see it in a more narrow way. We only have a certain amount of bandwidth. So as we look farther into the future, we see on a narrower perspective. You could think of a man in ancient times in hunter-gatherer society he has that predator vision. He looks out into the horizon and sees something moving that's not a tree, that's a deer or an enemy or whatever it is. And he's able to pick that out because his vision is tuned to seeing things in the distance. And the woman, she's in the tribe. She's looking after, she's got a pot of soup boiling over here. She's got a couple of kids over here. She's got to look after grandma over here. And so she needs to see in a very broad perspective, but she's living second by second, minute by minute. She's not worried about, is my man going to bring home the meat? Because that's not her problem. And she hasn't the bandwidth to worry about those things. What's going to happen next? She doesn't need to worry. The man worries about that. She worries about the immediate needs. And we see that in a modern family where the man is sitting there planning, okay, how are we going to afford to buy a new house when we have more kids? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And they're looking to the future and trying to figure out what it is they're going to need to do to solve problems that are coming up. Meanwhile, the woman's making sure, the house is clean, the food is cooked, the man's clothes are clean so he can go off to work, and the kids are looked after. She's really looking after that domestic sphere is in the immediate. Much of what the man is doing is planning and preparing for the future. And together, it creates a complete structure in the family and allows the family to be robust, to be stable, to survive over time. Yeah. And what we did by losing that is we have two people trying to fill the same role. So we have the woman worried about what's happening in the future while neglecting the present. And we have the man figuring, I don't need to worry about the future. And meanwhile, he's busy with the present, or he is so occupied with domestic duties that it impacts his ability to live to plan for the future. And this is why couples today who share chores, for example, the average family income of a family that splits chores 50-50 is significantly lower than the family that splits those chores up, where the man makes the money and the woman does the domestic duties. Even if she doesn't work at all, the average family income is still higher.
That's interesting.
So one income families make more than two is basically on average across the population is basically what I'm saying there. It comes down to hormones, really.
Yeah, and of course, well, I work and my wife doesn't. She stays at home and raises the kids and educates our children for us, or handles most of the education. But what that's allowed us to do then, of course, is because my wife is taking care of everything in the immediate, as we've just discussed, I'm then free to focus on the future and to invest much more in my current potential and my current goals, because my wife is taking care of the immediate. And I don't have to worry about that as much because it's all taken care of. I trust her to deal with everything. But also, I think, of course, then when you've got two parents working as much as they are, and certainly with everyone being quite career driven in the modern society, you've got that sort of competition then between parents, but also that complacency where the father thinks, well, it's okay, I don't need to work as hard because my wife earns X, so we'll have two very mediocre jobs where neither of us have to work too hard, and we'll be fine because we have two incomes, rather than the single income family like myself who thinks, well, actually, this is all of my responsibility. I'm going to focus on this. My wife has got everything under control at home.
Yeah, not and people will talk about, well, how do you make as much money with one income as you did with two? One of the advantages is you don't need to. You don't need to have two cars.
Yeah.
You don't need to have two sets of professional working clothes, which they're expensive. Women's working clothes are significantly more expensive than men because they have fashion desires, whereas men just want the simplest things. So they have these fashion desires. So their clothes are roughly 50% more expensive than ours. They're also more fragile, so they go through them quicker. They end up spending about twice as much as we do on clothing for, say, a corporate job. So that expense is gone. There's no eating out for her. She doesn't need to eat out. She's at home. She's made food with the kids. You eat out less because you come home and there's a meal there. You don't need to pick something up on the way home. There's a tremendous amount of money and time and energy saved by doing that. And that enables you to, even if your income is roughly the same as a two family or maybe even a little less, you actually have more disposable income,
Yeah.
more expendable income after bills because your expenses are greatly reduced, especially if you can pick. And one of the problems when you have a husband and wife working, he gets a great job offer, but it's in another city and she's going to have to give up her job. Oh, he can't take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. He can't follow his career progression because it's going to put her unemployed and maybe, she can't find another job in what she's doing so easily, or vice versa, whatever it happens to be. And so there's a lot of compromises that need to be made.
Mm-hmm. And it's
And
funny
your whole relationship becomes about compromising rather than optimizing.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because a couple of years ago, my family and I moved to Toronto for 6 months for my work. And obviously we were able to, at the drop of a hat, because we had about maybe 6 to 8 weeks notice. And we were able to do it because it was just my job. My wife didn't have a job to leave behind, or she didn't have, she couldn't take 6 months off work. She didn't need to. So we left and we lived in Toronto for 6 months, and it was a mind-blowing experience. It was fantastic for our development, our growth, as well as the children. And so we were able to do that relatively easily because it was just my job, and there's no ties to our freedom. There's less ties to our freedom.
So in your family, you make the money
Mm-hmm.
and your wife does all the domestic things. So that means, you never ever have to wash a dish or cook a piece of food or entertain a child. Basically, you get to come home and be served like a god king, right? Or how does that work?
No, and I think that's where a lot of people get that misinterpretation, and a lot of people assume that's my life on Twitter. But no, of course, leadership is far more than these are our two very extremely rigid roles, and that's all we ever do. I am there to lead my family. If stuff needs doing, I'm there to assist. And of course, I thoroughly enjoy spending time with my children. Because I work from home now, but pre-COVID, I did work in an office full time. And every time when I came home from work, I'd put the children to bed because that was my time to connect with them. So I put them to bed every single night. Every night, with the odd exception, just because that was my time to connect with them. If I'm up in the morning and the kids get up in the morning, we're out. We'll go for a walk. We'll do stuff together. It's absolutely not this sort of dark image of I'm just going to do my job, have no connection with my wife or kids, and literally do nothing around the house. If I walk past something, I'm going to pick it up. If I'm prepping food and if I'm cooking tonight and there's dishes, then I might do some while there's some food cooking. I'm not going to be. I'm never going to do anything. The dishes are there, but the wife can do them after,
Yeah,
even though I'm right here.
it's like some mercenary looking at his contract and going, "It
Yeah.
explicitly says I don't have to do that." Yeah, you have to talk to the union.
Yeah.
It's not like that kind of thing. It really is because family should be based on love. There
Mm-hmm.
is duty. There is respect, and there is other things in there, but it should be based on love. And we cover for each other when another person has some deficiency. I have 2-year-old twins, and it was difficult birth for my wife. She was 40 when she gave birth to 2 children at once, and one normal birth, and one got stuck, and he was going to die, so they had to give a cesarean. And so she came home from the hospital black and blue from all of the work they had to do on her, trying to push the baby out and everything. And it looked like she'd been in a car, hit by a car in the midsection or something. And she was in a tremendous amount of pain. It was difficult for her to get up and do anything. And basically for about 3 weeks, until she was enough recovered, I did everything because I had to. I took some time off work, some paternity leave, and I helped her with everything. And we hired a cleaners to come and do the cleaning, but I helped her making sure there was food was ready. If she needed something to be moved from some place to another, I'd do it, and she could just relax. We need to cover for each other when we love each other. I've had times in the past where I've been very, very ill and unable to do the things that I would normally do. And my wife went out and picked up the slack. She ran our business when I was too ill to run it. And now that I'm doing well, that I'm feeling well, I take care of her when she needs it. And that is really what leadership, that is a part of what leadership is setting that tone within the family. We help each other, and the kids notice it. They will pick that up, and they're going to want to then participate in that as well. They're going to want to help because that's what they see as the pattern that their father sets. Whereas leadership's about setting a pattern of behavior. This is how our family operates. This is what we do. These are the unspoken sometimes, and sometimes very clearly made rules of how our family operates. A lot of people think about rules, they say it's a list of things I'm not allowed to do. But really, if we think about it, what it is it's a list of boundaries within which we can operate. It keeps us safe. It keeps us from going too far, from crossing lines which destroy reputations. And it's up to a husband to set those, because you can't come to those agreements by committee. The husband needs to set what those boundaries are, with the best interest of his wife and children as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where the common misconception comes from. When we say leadership, I think a lot of people think of your classic 1950s husband who expects his slippers ready when he gets back and grunts at the kids and just reads the paper all night and barely talks to anyone. But that's not what it is at all.
My dad never told me he loved me. He just watched John Wayne and chewed his steak.
Yeah, and that's what everyone, or a lot of people, assume that's what we mean when we talk about restoring leadership, but it's the complete opposite of that. And I think that's
that was an abandonment of leadership.
That's where
we're not trying to restore that.
No, a lot of today's problems are because men as a whole dropped the ball back then, and we're not trying to go back to that. Not at all. We're trying to rectify that mistake.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that there can really be traced a lot of society's problems to, we'll blame the boomers. Boomers did this and boomers did that. But how were the boomers raised?
Mm-hmm.
How did society decay so fast with one generation? And right following that generation, this is not something only to blame the boomers. Yes, everyone's responsible for their decisions, and collectively they made a lot of bad ones. But to a large extent, they were raised in mercenary families where everyone was, there was a lot of men that came back broken from war, and they were able to go out and make money and work and do things like that. A lot of women who were broken from the war period and all the hard work that they had to do. Women were working every waking moment in factories, completely without any man, not knowing if their man would ever come back for years at a time. Now the war is over. They now have to learn how to integrate with a man leading them again, which they haven't had to do for perhaps years. They have to take back a virtual stranger into their bed. After a man goes through war, he's a different man than he was before. So they have to pull this stranger into their bed that they don't know. And it left society so scarred that they raised those boomers in a very broken way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, this is not about making excuses for people, but we need to understand how we got to where we are to know how to fix it. And so we have to see, okay, they were traumatized. That caused them to make some bad decisions. That led to continual intergenerational trauma until now. We're going to have to undo it. And that's what your and I generation is doing. We're the generation that will restore fatherhood, restore what I call patriarchy, because it's not just fathers. You're a father means that you're the dad of some children, and you're a husband to a wife and a dad of some children. But patriarchy is about the cooperative effort between the fathers to protect the community at large in which their family lives. And we're starting to recognize that fathers are needed in the house. But if you think fathers are important, wait till you find out about patriarchs. Just as a father guides and protects his children and his wife, patriarchs guide and protect society. And I used to be part of a show called Patriarch Hour with my good friend James Fox Higgins. And we did a lot of good work on there explaining to people that patriarchy is supposed to be, and the only sustainable patriarchies are the benevolent care of women, children, and young men by the older men in society. And I'm just past my 40s. How old are you, roughly?
I'm 29.
Yeah, so you're a little more than 10 years younger than me. You're not that far from getting into the age where you're starting, we start to shift at a certain age from thinking, when we're really young, it's how do I build myself up? Then it's how do I build my family up? And then we get to a point where I'm going to have to release my children out into the world at some point. And this is not a good world to release them into. And we start being concerned about our local communities. We start being concerned about things much broader than our own home. And for men, that's how we become patriarchs, is having that concern allows us to start getting involved with these things and really making a difference. What happens in your family when you and your wife have a disagreement about a subject where you feel that giving in is not appropriate? It's something where you think that, or you believe that your specific viewpoint needs to be the one that the family follows. How do you negotiate that? How do you work that out?
Well, in the immediate instance, it depends on, if we take the children, for example, it depends on who they've asked first and who said something first. But of course, if my wife says something, allows it, and I thought that it was a bad idea, then we have a brief discussion in front of the children as well, because I think it's great for them to see that we can work through and talk about minor disagreements like that very amicably and see how the process works. And then, we just explain our points. And then if it's a bit more, if it's a bit deeper than that, we have a genuine discussion about it afterwards. There's no, I stamp my foot down and that is my final word. No, because I'm here to lead. I'm here to convince people. I'm not here to rule so much as I'm there to lead. So we have a discussion, and thankfully, my wife and I disagree on very little, and we certainly don't disagree on anything major, because that's why we're husband and wife.
Exactly.
Because we've already been through that process of what our morals and values are. So they are just generally
fundamental to having that agreement is behaving in such a way that your wife can trust your judgment.
Yes.
On areas where she may disagree with you, but she knows you have good judgment. And I remember early in my marriage saying to my wife, we'd have a disagreement about how something should be done. We ran a business together, and so we handled that a little differently because, we were still husband and wife in the business, but we were partners in that. So it was a little different. But I would say to her, do you trust my judgment? And she'd say yes. And I said, this is an area where I'm absolutely sure this was true. And she'd say, okay, I don't think so, but I'm going to trust your judgment here. Let's see what happens. And I'll back your play on this. I'll go with what you want. I'll support it, and we'll see how it works. And I would tell her, this doesn't work when you say, do what I say. If it goes bad, you clean it up. No, do what I say. If it goes bad, I'm going to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to hang you out to dry for following my instructions. When you do that, you will find that women and children cooperate much more in the family when the father takes responsibility for his decisions and doesn't foist that
Yes.
off onto them. That's the main reason I found that it's difficult for women, especially, to cooperate with their husband, is that it often turns out negatively for them, and they end up having to clean up the mess. And that you can't do that. You will not get cooperation if that cooperation imposes a cost on your spouse. So you have to make sure that you pay the cost of your decisions, not her.
Yeah, and it's about generally establishing that foundation of leadership and
Yeah.
proving that you are a man of your word, and showing that you have follow through and that you deal with the consequences of your actions and that you're willing to. I mean, I think a lot of this hesitancy for cooperation is because a lot of wives don't trust their husbands to lead.
Yes.
They don't, so, and they've proven to them time and time again that they can't lead or won't lead, and she knows then what's going to happen, or she is pretty, she's got a guarantee almost of what's going to happen if she trusts you again, because she's been down this road before and you've shown her what happens.
And women will, rightly, I think, they'll extrapolate a man's failure to lead in one area with his failure to lead in another. So here's a great example. If you love your wife and children and yourself, you should be working on your physical fitness. And being the leader in physical fitness in your family is your responsibility as a father. And I don't just mean exercise, health in general. Are you
Mm-hmm.
living a healthy lifestyle? Are you sleeping properly? Are you abusing drugs and alcohol? If you're doing these things, you're not setting a good example for the family. So if a woman sees you being a fat slob who has no control over his food, and now there's some situation where you are saying, look, trust me, no, I'm not interested in that woman, or whatever it happens to be, like some area where there's a question comes up about your competence to deal with things like a man, and she goes, like, he's got no control over his diet, how's he going to have control over anything else?
Yeah,
How does he control
exactly.
his appetites? How can she trust you with any of your appetites if you can't control your actual appetite for food? And so she's going to judge you and extrapolate that out into other things. And for most men, their wife can judge them better than almost anyone they know can, because she sees them at their most intimate and vulnerable in a way that they often don't allow their male friends to see.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of men don't even have male friends. But if they do, they're not able to see what's going on really in the same way their wife can. And I really encourage that open communication. I encourage women to say, women need to talk about their needs. They need to say to the husband, I need to trust you, but but I feel that this is undermining my trust in you.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
to
it's
let him know.
it's that basic instinct where we're protector and provider, and the woman is reliant on us because, like I said, she cares for our children. She invests a lot physically, a lot of her physical health into getting pregnant, giving birth, and breastfeeding children. And so there's that sort of baseline instinct there, which she relies for her own safety completely on the ability to trust you. And like you said, if you're in shape or you're getting in shape and you're eating right and you are taking care of yourself, it immediately translates to, oh, he's taking care of himself, so he's going to be able to take care of us. But not just that. If I'm getting up in the morning, if I'm telling my wife, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym X number of times a week, first thing in the morning. If I'm getting up and doing that, she's seeing that I'm a man of my word.
Yeah.
If I'm going to tell her, yeah, I'm going to lose all this weight and I'm going to do all this, and then I crash again and I crash again and I crash again, I'm immediately conveying to her that I'm no longer a man of my word. And that is rightly then, like you said, extrapolated across other areas of the relationship, because I've failed in one area and she's going to naturally assume that my word doesn't mean very much. So why would it mean much in other areas of the relationship?
Yeah, I see this a lot too, that men will promise things that make their wife happy that they have no ability to fulfill. It's not even an intention issue. They just can't do it. They overpromise and underdeliver. And this is a huge problem that can only be resolved by reducing how much you're promising. be realistic about what you can do as a man. There are women who are married to men who are paraplegic, and they're very happy with their husband. And the husband doesn't promise to get up and do squats for them. He doesn't promise to go on a run with them. He doesn't promise them things he can't do. He operates within what he can do. And so I think men today, we need to do that. There are times my wife says, this thing needs to get fixed in the house. And I say to her, you know what? I'm not going to have time to do anything about that for 2 weeks. And even then, it needs to be fixed before that. So I don't even know if I can have time in 2 weeks. I just know for the next 2 weeks, I'm like booked solid. Hire a plumber. Go call the plumber. When he gets here, I'll supervise him, or whatever it is, electrician or whatever he is. And I'll pay for it instead. So I still take the lead in solving the problem. I don't promise to solve it myself. I'll say, look, you have the time to call somebody. You go call somebody, because I'm too booked.
And that's an important facet of leadership. Leadership is not, you need to make sure you do everything. It is making sure everything gets done.
Yes. Yeah. And what you'll see with your children, trying to give me a Java update. Sorry. I thought I was going to freeze my computer for a second. But when you do this, you set an example for your children for your daughters, you set an example of how a man behaves. This is what she's going to look for. And for your sons, you set an example of how they should behave as men. And you'd be surprised how young the children will start to imitate that example. You mentioned that when there's a disagreement in your family, you have a discussion about it. Most people don't know how to have a productive discussion. They don't know how to have productive confrontation. What they do is, for an hour or two, they sit on opposite sides of the room yelling at each other about what they want to accomplish. There's no thinking, there's no reasoning, and there's no problem solving going on. It's a test of wills. And whoever has the strongest will ends up winning. In my family, that would be me every time. Yeah, I'm just not, that's not how I operate. But if I was, I couldn't be a very stubborn man if I want. And so I could always get my way. The end result would be a very unhappy wife and children, because they would feel that I was a tyrant in that case, even if the end result is the same end result that we would have gotten if I had explained it to them by forcing them to do it. I am a tyrant. They don't perceive it that way. I actually would be. You can't be a tyrant with good intentions. It doesn't matter. You're still a tyrant, even if your intentions are good, even if you want the best for your children. What you have to do is teach them, and sometimes this means teaching your wife too, how to reason through a problem. Some women are already excellent at that, and they don't need any instructions. Sometimes people need help with that. They need to go through that. And sometimes as men, we don't know how to do it, and we need to get help and then bring that back to the family. Men bring resources to the family. Sometimes those resources are not physical objects that you can touch. It's knowledge and information and processes that we can use in the family. When let's say my wife and my son aren't getting along about something, my wife wants him to do something, he wants to do something else, and they have this argument about it. I will often allow them to run the cycle of the argument. And while it's still fresh in their mind, I'll come and say, hey guys, what's happening? Oh, they'll each have their story about what happened. And I'll say, did you enjoy that argument? No, nobody enjoyed it. Do you want to do that again? No, because this is like the third time you've had this argument. Do you know how do you have some ideas about what you could do differently to not end up in this position? And every person will go, well, if that person did this differently, then we wouldn't have an argument. And I'm like, well, maybe that's true, but you have no control over them. What could you do differently? And it starts them into a pattern of thinking. You're teaching people how to think. You're teaching your children how to think. You're teaching sometimes your wife how to think as well about those particular problems, because women will have a tendency to solve problems in a way that works in the short term, but can have long-term negative effects. I've done this study. I've asked hundreds of men and women, is it okay to manipulate someone if the outcome you want for them is good? women almost universally say yes, men almost universally say no, because men understand that the long-term consequence of manipulation is the loss of trust. Whereas women are like, literally, they'll say to me, it got the job done. And so teaching them how to teach the kids how to think long term and how to persuade and to reason with children ends up with better results for everybody. So I'll have that conversation with them. What could you have done differently? What outcome did you want? The outcome between you and your mother was compatible, and you guys could have come to a peaceful resolution of this instead of yelling at each other. This isn't how we behave in our house. And generally, those arguments don't happen again. I have very small kids, so they're going through everything for the first time. And this works on very small children. It works on 2-year-olds. They will not answer all these questions. So you kind of ask them and then answer them. Let them think for a second and then answer them. How are you going to deal with mom different? The little kids that can't quite speak yet, the way they get everything is hair pulling and pinching and biting, because that's how they get your attention to get what they want. But there are nice ways to get what you want. Learn to speak. Now, hey kid, learn to speak. But yeah, it's a little bit that, and it's a little bit, approach gently. Your mother is a woman. You need to be gentle with her. I have 3 boys, and they are like little bags of cement. They're hard and lumpy, and they don't have any fat on them. They're all lean and muscular, and even the 2-year-olds, they jump on their mother, and it hurts. It's not comfortable for her. And to teach them to be gentle, to reason them through, because they jump on each other and they beat each other up, and they love it and they laugh the whole time. You can't treat mom like that. This is not how you treat mom. With the older one, he doesn't like being told what to do, but you can enlist him into your project. So if you say, I need my office clean so that I can work here. I have work in half an hour. Can you help me clean it? He comes right in, helps you clean, does whatever you want. If you say, go to my office and clean up your toys, he won't do it. He will fight it the whole time. He doesn't want to be ordered. He wants to feel he's part of a team on a mission. And so as a parent, I need to know what works for him. I need to parent him according to the way that is good for him, not good for me. As a parent, that is part of taking the lead. Part of taking the lead is getting the most out of the people you lead by leading them in a way that's compatible with their psychology. And the biggest problem that I see in fathers leading, and even in mothers directing their children, is that it's all about what's good for the parent.
Yeah.
And that's how do you make sure with your children that you're doing what's good for the kid versus what's good for the parent?
Yeah, I think it's understanding that, like you said, that long-term goal. Really, it's seeing a bit further down the line, because obviously we have, I think, a lot of the time when we're acting selfish, we do think of the immediate gain to ourselves. Because if we were truly acting in our best interest, well, we'd think of the long-term goal that we could achieve by acting in a certain way in this given scenario. But what we're doing is thinking immediately of ourselves and sort of indulging that desire immediately for instant gratification for ourselves, instantly getting them to shut up, instantly getting them to do this thing we've asked, without regard for the future consequences for that. So I think it's very important to have that sort of that overall understanding, and it's an entire process I think you have to go through, and understanding sort of. I think part of the problem today is we've lost a lot of sight on legacy and the importance of legacy. We see a lot of stuff on Twitter talking about, when you teach your son something, you're teaching your grandchildren something. And a lot of that gets tossed around, but it's so important to recognize that whatever you do today instills in your children, which will instill in your grandchildren. And when you sort of have that long-term stepping back perspective, you kind of start to overcome that immediate desire, because really you recognize that actually you don't want immediate compliance or immediate obedience. You want to be for your children to feel respected. You want for them to grow and to nurture that growth within them, and that and and certainly with boys who tend to be a bit more resistant to certain things. It's good to be able to notice that fire within them and stoke it correctly. You either, if you're not looking long term, you're either going to just dampen it entirely, which is something I went through myself, or you're
And I
going
think that's
to
what's happened to most boys today is
yeah.
they've had that fire put right out.
Yeah, exactly. Or the alternative, which coincidentally happened to my brother, is that fire goes out of control and they develop real anger issues and they get quite violent and they snap at the drop of a pin and they can't control that fire within them. So there's no easy answer to that question. It's sort of, you have to go through the process and look at the long term and realize that, raising kids is part of raising your grandkids, is part of raising their kids, it's intergenerational parenting almost.
Well, it's why I say that the family is the base unit of society and not the individual, because how you are raised in your family decides not just what you do, but it decides far out into the future how your society is going to be shaped. And we have had several generations of decay. And I firmly believe that we're at the we are either hit the bottom or very much at the bottom, and we're starting to bounce up the other side. And change tends to happen slowly at first and then suddenly, social change. And we can go back to things like beating your wife used to be legal and recommended up until not that long ago. Currently, beating your children is legal and recommended by most, but by a lot of people who are parents. And what ends up happening is even if someone stops doing that, let's say someone stops hitting their children, then what they do is they just completely ignore their kids. Because if I can't hit them, I don't know what to do with them. I'm just going to ignore them. And neither of those are peaceful. Neither of those are parenting. There is, you don't go from at least hitting the kid gives them some attention. So I've dealt with children that have been hit, and I've dealt with children that were ignored. And the ignored children said, I would have almost preferred to get hit because at least I would have got some attention.
Yeah, it's almost
that's how bad it is. Ignoring your children is worse than physically assaulting them.
It's sort of those two different avenues of fear, because obviously if they're getting hit, they're going to fear the physical violence from the parent. But if they're being ignored, they completely fear for their safety because they know they can't look after themselves and they are totally and utterly reliant on you for their survival. And if you're completely ignoring them, well, then the instinctual alarm bells start going off. And they're thinking, well, how am I going to survive? Because my parents are completely ignoring me.
And they grow up thinking, if my parents wouldn't invest time into me, that means I'm not worth anything. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not worth anything, why should I bother taking care of myself and making my own life better? And then you have men that are very, very difficult to motivate them to do the things that are good for them because they've not ever been shown that they're worth investing in, that they're worth it, that they're worth love, that they're worth attention, their own love and attention. And it's really like we described, it's like a fire that's gone out completely. If you have a small fire burning, I don't know if you've ever been camping, and I've been camping and it's been pouring rain. Everything was wet. We didn't have enough matches because we didn't plan to stay as long. We got stuck on an island in the wilderness on a boat trip. And it was supposed to be a one-day trip with Gilligan Island. And we were freezing. My brother and I, my dad, we were freezing. And it was great weather when we left. It was terrible weather when we got out there. Well, the moment you get the fire going, it is so hard to get a flame. But the moment you get the fire going, you're going to be okay, because you can stoke that tiny fire into a roaring fire where it's so hot that even though you're soaked, you're standing next to the fire and you feel warm. Well, men who have had that fire go out completely, just the process of igniting it is most of the work. That's 80% of the work. Once it's going, those men are going to be okay. They just need a little guidance after that. But to get it going, that is so hard. And parents, the thing you don't want to do the most is crush your children. You don't want to put that fire out, because you put that out and they will spend the rest of their life trying to get it going. And it's really the biggest problem. Children who the fire burns too hot, you can learn to pull that anger back, but it's a lot harder to get it going when it's out.
Yeah.
One of the things that we it's interesting because that fire analogy, I actually did a presentation with a friend of mine called Haythrun, and in that presentation we used that example of, on one end is like a forest fire, and on the other end it's like a candle
Yeah.
that's about to go out in the wind, and how men are like a flame, and fire is a powerful tool that can accomplish tremendous things, but it has to be strong enough and controlled. It has to be within a
Hmm.
controlled environment. And you'll see that, say, in a blast furnace. It's controlled. It is at a certain temperature. It's done in the right way, and then it's a powerful tool to accomplish things. And we need fire to survive as humans. We cannot survive anymore. Maybe we could in the past, but we can't survive anymore without fire. That's how we, melt metal to make cars. That's how we cook our food. That's how we do almost everything nowadays. And so we need fire. In the same, we need that masculine energy out in the world. It is what takes the raw resources of nature and builds it into something, is primarily masculine energy. Women build communities, men build a place for those communities to live and set the boundaries and the protection for them. Women build the people, we build everything else. It's been it's only 40. Sorry, I looked at the clock and I thought it said an hour and something. So what else would you like to share with us today, Alec?
Wow. I think it's just, like you said, I think that there is a movement growing again now. I think there has been a shift in terms of men trying to reclaim their roles that they willingly gave up. I think that's the issue. Part of the issue is a lot of men out there. I mean, we take a look at like the red pill community and everything, and they're just bitter. They're bitter that they lost everything they had, and they blame everyone else. And there's a lot of other men that blame everyone else for losing it. There's a lot of people blaming feminism and blaming other porn, all of those industries. And yes, they've played a part in that sort of devolution. But we have to accept and nothing's going to change until we accept the responsibility of the fact that we willingly went along with that. Men willingly allowed that to happen because we would have had it within our power to change it, but we chose not to. We divulged that sort of those baser instincts and allowed ourselves to fall into gluttony and lust with porn and all this junk food and this instant binge watching of Netflix. And not that Netflix is inherently bad, but it's just that sort of culture of overindulgence, and we've allowed things to fall flat. But I think there is a change, there is a shift right now happening, and a lot of people are looking for that direction, and that's why I feel like messages like yours are incredibly important, because we're at that sort of precipice where the shift is happening, and there's a lot of men who don't know how to change because they've lost, they've neglected that masculine instinct for so long that they have no idea how to act on it, or how to, as we've just discussed, how to reignite that flame. It's just gone out. And they need other men around them. They need a brotherhood of other people. And the key to effective leadership is having a brotherhood of other men. And
that's right. When your flame is risking going out, or your flame has gone out, and you hang around with other men whose flame of masculinity is burning strong, you can share flame. They'll help you get reignited. They'll help you get going. And fire isn't just heat, it's light as well. They will provide a light in the darkness while you get your life sorted out. If you're a man and you want to be a better husband, better father, if you're a single man and maybe this is something that's a longer term goal, or even if you're a man who raised your kids and you didn't do a good job of it, get together with men like Alec and myself. Follow us on Twitter, message us. We can provide help for you, because even if you're done raising your kids, you still have the grandkids to think about. You always have another generation coming. And it is our responsibility to look forward to that future and do what we can for our children. You mentioned people blaming. Well, they're looking backwards. And it is good to understand how we got into the mess that we're in for the purpose of understanding how to get out of it. But when you want to look to what to do, you have to look to the future. Actions happen in the here and now, and then they affect the future. And this is what happens. This is the mistake a lot of men make, is they're so focused on the past and what happened that they don't think about what to do next. I've had young clients like this where I said, what are you going to do next? Well, and then a big bunch of theory. And I'm like, no, tell me tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock what you're going to be doing with your life. What are you going to be doing? And, because we'd agreed, for example, they were going to work out at 8 o'clock. What are you going to be doing tomorrow? I'm going to be working out. And what is your exercise going to be? Blah, 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 blah. And when are you going to finish at 8:45? Good. And then what are you going to do? And work with them on those basics, because for a lot of men, they're so focused on the past, they can't do the simple daily tasks of the future. And they become helpless. But the good news is men consented to what happened. They allowed it to happen. But if we allowed it to happen, that means it's also in our power to stop giving consent and to disallow it for the future. Everything that was done can be undone. It is our job to undo it.
Exactly. And there's a phrase that I quite like, and that is, to be a man is to bear responsibility for all things. And I say that frequently to myself, to remind myself and keep myself grounded. And when I'm talking to my wife, and we're just talking about life and other people, and I bring it up then as well. And before now, she has told me, well, that sounds kind of cruel. Do you think that sounds unfair? And I said, well, no, because it might sound unfair to some people that you have to bear the responsibility of everything. But on the flip side, that means you have the power to change anything you want. It is up, you have that power within you to change your life and to change yourself. And like you said, even if your kids are raised, I mean, you screwed it up, and you recognize that now. Well, your kids are damaged from that, and they're going to pass that damage on to your grandchildren. And even if they're working to rectify the damage that you inflicted on them, that's a long process. And there's things within you, and there's things within myself that sometimes I have a realization that I realize why I'm doing a certain action or why I'm thinking a certain thought. And I think to myself, well, and why did I do that? And then I connect it to past events. And, it's like a swift right hook just out of the darkness. It's just a constant process. So if your kids are raised, try to make amends now. Tell them, rectify your past mistakes. You're not going to be able to erase your past mistakes, but it is the first step in the right direction to try and rectify what you did for the sake of your grandchildren, because you will affect them now.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, they have a hard time figuring out how to do that. Talk to someone, get some help on how you can rectify it. But essentially, if you were a tyrant, you now have to go in with calm and love. And that's not going to be natural to you. You're going to have to actually, if you want to change your behavior, you have to change. If you want to change your outcome, you have to change. If you ignored your children, now is the time to give them attention. Give your grandkids attention. And when you give your grandkids attention, apologize to your children. Say, I am sorry I didn't give you the attention you needed as a child. I was wrong. Don't make a bunch of excuses. Well, it was the time I lived in, and I thought I was doing the right thing, and blah, blah, blah. And your mom was irritating, so I didn't want to come home at night. And all of the excuses that people will use. No, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I should have fought harder.
Exactly.
I should have figured it out, but I didn't. I'm sorry.
If you're looking to restore your leadership within the home, with your kids, with your wife, expect resistance and know that you deserve that resistance, because you've got to build that trust back. You can't just decide, oh, I'm going to be a great leader now, and expect everyone to fall into line. No, you've proven that you've let the family down time and time again. And it's going to take some trust, rebuilding of trust with your kids and your wife, to be able to place that trust in you. Because certainly when your kids are young, and certainly from the prospects of your wife, when they place that trust in you, they're placing their lives in your hands. They are giving you control over their lives. They decided, yes, I'm going to be reliant on you. And that is a major step, certainly for a wife who's lost that trust. It is going to be a long and painful journey, that happens in small increments. It's up to you to restore it in small increments with small tasks and then build up to bigger tasks. But it is the only way forward.
And it starts with owning it. I think it starts with
Mm-hmm.
that apology. One of the things I tell parents, if it's the father that comes to me, I say, step number one is you need to apologize to your spouse and kids separately. It's very private. They apologize to them separately usually. And when you apologize to the kids, you can mention, I talked to your mother as well, and I told her sorry that I wasn't leading the family as well. It's good for them to know it, but it's good to have that done privately. But apologize to them deeply and from your heart, and make a promise, because you can't just say, I've been a jerk, I'm going to be nicer now, and just forget everything that happened so far. Let's do a do-over. It doesn't work that way. You have to take the time to not just correct the mistake, but let them know this is the start of something new. Now, this is really hard if you've tried to do this a couple of times and failed. The reality is, I don't know of any man who's ever done that turnaround that wasn't part of a group of men who are already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has no way of orientating himself in the world to know what positive masculinity is, to know what direction he should be going, if there's not some men already at the destination holding up their torches going, we're over here, come to us, we're over here. And so you need to get around the right kind of men. You need to be around men who are going to help lead you, just like you're the leader in the family. It doesn't mean you're the leader of your community. That doesn't mean that you're the leader of your tribe. You're the leader of your wife and children. Most men need to follow other more successful men as mentors and coaches. Doesn't mean they own you. This doesn't mean they're your boss in your life. But they need to have a man whose example they can follow in order to learn. Now, maybe that's your father, but maybe it's not. Maybe your father wasn't that example, and you need to go find another man to learn these things from, and to whose example you can use. In fact, I found it best to have several different men where I can say, that man is really good at managing money. That man is really good at managing his male friend peer group. That man has a really great way of dealing with children. And I can learn something from all this man. He understands women. He knows women's psychology. He understands how to talk to them properly. I'm going to listen to that man. That man might not even be good with kids. He might not be good with his money. I don't care. He's good at that thing. I'm going to learn the thing that he's good at from him, and go out and learn from different men the things that they're good at that you don't know how to do, until the point where you start becoming the one that's helping other men. And that's the point that you and I are at now. We're not done developing, but we're far enough along that we know some things, and we can go and help the men that are 10 steps behind us, that are a few steps behind us, younger men. And that's really what it is. It's not about some men are on top and some men are below. It's a chain of men, each man helping the man who's one step behind him. And together, that is how we form society. And that part of society has been destroyed.
Yes.
Too many men died during the world wars was part of it. But then after the war, we had no attempt to rebuild it. All the men's organizations, all the fraternities, all of that fell apart. I've seen more fraternities formed in the last 3 or 4 years than the previous 40 years of my life. 10 years ago, if you're a man, you go, I'm going to form a fraternity. And like, oh, what university? No, I'm going to form a fraternity. It's a brotherhood of adult men who are going to get together and talk to each other about what they should do in life, and challenge each other and work together. Sounds kind of gay. That's what you hear, right? But now I'm seeing men go, this is what's needed for men.
Yeah.
Lose me with that gay talk. This is not gay. Men helping other men is extremely important for the future of masculinity. And it is the only way that masculinity has ever been passed on, is from man to man. You're not going to learn it from your mother. You're not going to learn it from your teachers at school or your university. You're only going to learn it from a man. Yeah, you won't even really learn it from a book. You need to be around actual human beings.
It's brotherhood. That's what's been lost. Brotherhood has been completely lost. And just talking about, it's not just the sort of learning from other men, which is obviously very important, but it's that accountability you get for being part of a brotherhood as well. Your brothers will hold you accountable like no one else can, like you can't, like your wife can't. And it's unfair to expect your wife to hold you accountable.
Yes.
That's what your brotherhood is for. And they
Yeah.
understand what it is to be a man and those responsibilities. They understand that masculine element, and they will hold your feet to the fire. I'm not talking about friends. You could be friends with your brothers, but not all of your friends are brothers. I'm talking about the men who will hold your feet to the fire when you screw up, but the men who are, equally there to support you, shields up when the enemy's at the gates.
Well, and that's the sign of a man that actually cares about you and loves you. And to talk about love within a brotherhood, there's always some kind of bunch of taboos been formed around that recently. Basically, like I said, since the Second World War, taboos formed around that to prevent men from treating each other with love and care. The way men love each other is by making each other stronger, challenging each other, pointing out where the other people need help, helping them when they can. It is sometimes a kind of brutal Spartan process of grinding you down until you can't take it, and then saying, okay, we'll help you get back up again. As soon as you're up, you get ground down again. But that makes men masculine, makes us stronger. And it's a lot of work, not just for the person that's improving themselves, but for the men that are mentoring as well. If you are in a fraternity, don't take that mentorship for granted. If a man is providing you value by teaching you things, provide value back by doing something for him. Find something somewhere where you can offer him value. Reciprocate what you receive. And sometimes I've had guys that I've mentored and they say, what can I do for you? And I'm like, find a guy who's 5 years younger than you and a couple of steps behind and help him. Tell him what I told you, and then go find another one. I want you to mentor 5 guys in the next 5 years. That's how you pay me back. And for me, that's the best repayment most of the time. I mean, yes, I am a coach, and you'll have to pay me in actual dollars. But when it comes to people that are in my real life that are close to me, I don't charge my friends for coaching. But when it's people that are close to me that I interact with, I tell them that. I said, the way you pay me back is, well, first of all, we're loyal to each other and we take care of each other. But really, the only way you can pay back my mentoring, I don't need to hear the things I just said. You need to go and pass that on to the next generation. You need to come circle back around and tell my sons the things I told you. So it's not just coming from dad. It's coming from the community. This is how we operate as a people, as opposed to, oh, that's my dad's crazy ideas. No, all the good men I meet, all the men I like, all the men that I respect, they all are telling me the same thing. It's not just my dad. No, this is how men operate. Okay, I understand this now. I can move. I can move like this. I can be like this. I can be part of this. Our sons, they can't just hear things from us. No matter how much they love and respect us, we're one person. If they hear that message over and over again from our friends, from the other men around us, backed up, of course, by the women as well, saying, yeah, but listen to your dad, listen to your dad, listen to your uncle, listen to your brother, listen to your dad's friends. These are wise men. They'll tell you good things. That's the only way to counter the constant propaganda that children are have projected on them. And you homeschool your kids, you probably don't let them watch hours and hours of television either. That's important. Minimize that propaganda. But man, it's insidious. It gets in everywhere.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And just ask your kid. I don't let my kid watch propaganda, but I ask my kid, who's Batman? Who's Spider-Man? Oh, they know somewhere. Somehow mass entertainment gets in, and then through mass entertainment gets in the propaganda ideas, and we can't stop it. We have to undo it. And we do that by having not just us talk to them about masculinity, but other good men. And as a man, this is one of the biggest benefits of being part of a group of men, is that your son has other male role models to look up to.
Yep.
Your son might not be like you. You could be someone that's musical and artistic, and your son comes out and he's like, he only wants to play sports or work with his hands or whatever. Could be completely different than you. But if you've got a friend who lines up with your son like that, he can learn things from that man that you couldn't teach him. And we used to have that in society. We had uncles. We had big families, so we'd have a lot of uncles, a lot of we'd have our grandparents, and then we'd have the other members of the community. And it was the job of all men to father all children, so to speak. You saw a kid in trouble, you'd be like, it's not my kid. Let him be. No, you'd help that kid. And I think men still have that instinct today, but we have it beaten out of us, that instinct to step in and help other people, that instinct to lead, to give advice, to let people know that we can be there for them. And we need to ignore that propaganda against it. We have to go and do what we have to do as men. And I think it's that men coming together is what's going to fix society. We're not going to fix this at a political level until we fix it at the family level.
Yeah.
And at the level of the man. Once
100%.
That's fixed, I don't know what political solution will work. I don't know what social solution work, what institutions are going to work. I don't need to know that. All I need to know is how to make better men. They'll figure it out. My kids, my grandkids will figure it out because they'll be strong enough to do it, and they'll be surrounded by good men.
Amen to that.
This has been great, Alex. Alec, I've really enjoyed talking with you. We're about at the end of our time, and I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today. Please like and comment, and ask us questions as well. Where can people find you, Alec?
I am on Twitter at Fathers Reforged, and I will, as of February, be on YouTube under The Reforging.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to being on your channel as a guest.
Absolutely. Definitely.
I think that'll be great. Yeah, so you can either comment directly through YouTube or through Twitter here. I'm on Twitter at Noah Ravoy. You can also reach me on my website, noahravoy.com. And if you are looking for specific coaching help with fatherhood, reach out to one of the many men who are demonstrating a good example of fatherhood and ask them how they can get help. Most of these men, even if they're not coaching, they'll help you in the right direction. Thank you, everyone. It's been excellent having you on. Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.